Tell me your name and spell it.
Franklin G. Singer III, Franklin. G, middle initial, Singer, Senger, Roman numeral 3.
For a little background, could you tell me briefly about yourself and how long have you lived or been involved in the Hillcrest community? And you can also include your involvement in the Hillcrest Community Civic Association.
I've been a resident here since 1959, and so I came because I was called to be pastor at the Lutheran Church of the Holy Comforter, where I served for 50 years, and I retired a year ago. At that time, Hillcrest was, I would say, an all-white community, and they were still having difficulties integrating some of the areas of the city. But we had people who were interested in integration, and so Hillcrest gradually became integrated, not all in one block as had happened in some parts of the city, and sometimes by law, but just as property became available, sometimes sold to whites and sometimes to blacks. So it's continued to be that way, even though we are now predominantly a black community. We remain an integrated community, and I had hoped it would be more evenly divided than it is now. But we were disenchanted with the Hillcrest community organization that existed at that time. It was a small group of white people who thought white, and so we 25 years ago, of course, got the idea longer ago than that. It didn't happen overnight, but we carefully put together plans for a new community organization, and that new organization was what exists as Hillcrest Community Civic Association. And there were many people involved in the start of that, and it was, again, as I say, an integrated coming together of people of different races. And it was never a closed community organization. It was always open, and it met for a good many years at the Lutheran Church. This was formed on the lawn of Dennis and Gloria Logan, who had offered their home as a meeting place for our formation. And then I was able to secure the approval of Holy Comforter for the use of the church, and there was never any problem, and there were no expenses to the organization for the use of the church, which of course made it appealing. But then after we became involved in sponsoring Anthony Williams as mayor, why, Anthony in turn responded by keeping our needs in mind. And so our community our community showplace, I've forgotten just what we call it. We'll regularly meet.
The recreation center.
Yeah, the recreation center.
Yes.
That was a one-room building, tiny room where they could play cards, and that was about it. He got that enlarged, and there's a plaque in his honor in the entryway. If you go in there now, you can see the history spelled out. But I don't remember what year that was. I just know that then the Hillcrest Association took advantage of the offer of the rec center to come there to hold their regular meetings, and we've been there ever since. And of course it's much more expansive and provides more opportunities for gatherings. So I don't think there are expenses involved on our part there too, which meant the community has always been generous in providing space for the Civic Association. Now, is that type of background that you had wanted?
Yes, that's the
But
type
I'm
of
just
background.
talking off the top of my head.
That's perfect. You seem to think that the community is a strong neighborhood, Hillcrest. How will you define a strong DC neighborhood? And do you think that Hillcrest is a strong DC neighborhood?
Well, I consider a strong neighborhood to be one in which you have a good-sized number of people representing different elements of the community involved in plans and ideas and the carrying out of specific duties that will enhance and improve the community. And I think we've largely been able to do that, although as time passes, after all, we're 25 years old now, and a lot of the people who were in places of leadership are now no longer with us. And we have younger people coming on board, and of course that's a healthy sign also. But I think that the one big change, and I'm not sure that I think it was the best change, but when the Civic Association decided that they would have board meetings separate from the general meetings. It used to be we would have one large group meeting, and of course a lot of the time got eaten up by small items that people had as problems like the litter on their block or something like that, that now have been taken over by the board. But then again, the board is very complete in covering the agenda of what's needed in all of the different capacities of leadership and things that have been in the works for a while. And consequently, sometimes the general community isn't quite as aware as they used to be, and I miss that part where everyone takes part in the decision making and also in promoting the project. But then of course there are so many only so many months in the year to have topics presented to the general community. So, and yet I find that the monthly meetings, the general meetings, are very worthwhile. We cover a multitude of things in the course of a year, but it means that the board has to be expansive in reaching out to enlist people to participate in the other needs that are considered on a regular monthly basis.
So, given that you said that, so what is your opinion of the Hillcrest Community Civic Association and its role in creating a strong DC neighborhood? Do you think it has engaged the residents of the community to encourage active involvement and participation? And to what extent?
I say that is the part that makes a difference in involvement. That there is not as large a group of people as we formerly had involved in all of these different elements. Now, not everyone was interested in every element. And some people were glad to have that part put on the back burner so far as they were concerned. Let somebody else deal with that. So, you know, it's like coins have two sides. And that's the advantage and disadvantage. Is that the type of thing you mean?
Yes, that's what I wanted to know.
I think
You
sometimes you can't do it both ways.
Right, right. And I did not realize that the board meetings were open to the entire community. That's something I did not know.
Yeah.
So,
But the meetings do remain open for people to attend. It's just that unless people have a special axe to grind, they usually don't take advantage of that.
so how effectively do you think the HCCA has worked with the Hillcrest community, and by extension the rest of Ward 7, to garner goodwill, promote neighborliness, and maintain the wholesome community? And how effective has the various forms of communication and outreach proponents been effective?
I'm not sure. I wonder about that myself. I just wonder if the word, and I think we have excellent publicity because of the newsletter. I think that's superb now. And I don't think you can really do a whole lot of improvement in that because it's tops. And I think it's probably tops in the city. But to get people to take an interest in it, in the organization to start with, to inquire into that publicity and how widely it's distributed beyond subscribers, I don't know. I guess you probably have groups on the board that consider that kind of thing. Isn't that maybe a question that comes up with the board?
It has never come up before, but it's something that should probably be asked. And people believe that since it's on the website, you might be able to get more access.
Exactly. And you're more aware of that, of course, than I am. So this is not supposed to be a me ask you questions session. But that's what it boils down to.
But it works either way. I think it works well either way. So
just so we don't let that go, the outreach into the community, because it's easy for it to happen the way it had been. What we broke the cycle of was where it was a small, tiny group really ran the neighborhood. People didn't even know that they could turn there with their problems. But we changed all that with the coming of the association we have now. And hopefully people are introduced to that before. It's where a good reputation helps, because they may know that before they come here. That should be one of the things that invite them to, or incites their interest in living in this community.
So to what degree do you see the HCCA and the Hillcrest neighborhood as extensions of each other? In other words, do you think one may have been effective without the other in creating a strong DC neighborhood? And do you view them as separate entities, or are they one and the same to you? And for example, if one does well, does it naturally bring along the next? Or does success occur individually? And why do you see it?
I think you've answered that question by the way you ask it. But the way it should be, now you want to know whether I think it is that way. So I would say that there's no perfect way to get that worked out. That's why I was talking about how the two groups, the general group that meets at 10 o'clock and the board that meets at 9 o'clock, how you get that together, because you can't do it the way we previously did, because that got too involved. There were too many things for the general group to be involved with, and we would never have had time for the outside speakers or group leaders that come in to share with us what they share. And we would have just been involved in our own local problems. And that gets to be overwhelming.
So the Hillcrest neighborhood has been known for its civic mindedness, neighborliness, caring, and respect for the beauty of the environment. Is this something you agree with? If so, why? And are there any other adjectives that you will use to describe Hillcrest?
No, I think that's a good description. And of course, you could always find people who disagree with that because they didn't happen to be the recipient of some of that goodwill. But you get out of an organization basically the kind of thing you put in it. And if people don't reach out a little bit and find out what is involved in their community, you can't expect them to have benefited much from the community unless their chief benefit is being left alone. And there are people like that. And I've encountered it only very briefly, and I won't even go into that. But there are people who move into this neighborhood and want to be let alone. They don't want to be involved. But I think we need to make it clear that we are a community that invites involvement and that we do include them, because if they're not a part, you've heard that saying, not a part of the solution, then they must be a part of the problem.
So since the first time you moved into the community, do you see the continuation of the civic mindedness and neighborliness from when you were here for the first time? Or has it changed over time? Is it better or is it worse? And do you have an opinion on the HCCA in helping with the continuation?
I think probably that with what you've asked me already, that has already been revealed what I think. But trying to sum that up, I will say that I think it's far better, the lines of communication are far better now than when I moved into the community. I think the community was a snobbish style community when I moved here. Even though I was welcomed, I think that was largely because I was the pastor of a church in the community. But I don't think that everyone got the proper welcome, and certainly not an invitation to be involved in decision making for the community. And we're much better at that now. And I think any problem that comes down the road now has a way of being dealt with and is recognized by the association or some member in the association to bring it to the attention of the larger body that can do something about it. We know where to turn.
So what do you see as the three core elements that make for a strong neighborhood in the District of Columbia?
I saw that question when I dislike that particular approach. Sum it up in three. No, it's too variegated. The problems are too variegated, and yet not everything is responded to in the same way. And I wouldn't want to limit myself to three things. I think that what I've already responded with to you reveals the concerns I have. And that's all I can do is reveal concerns I have. I can't for my next door neighbor, and I hardly see him, and he goes, we don't talk about problems at all. But he's at the meetings, and he probably has a totally different view. But I think we have to make room for individualism. And I think the community maybe doesn't appreciate that.
So is there anything else?
If I said anything bitter, it would be if you don't want to go with the inner group, then don't bother. Now, I kind of start a discussion with you.
So is there anything else that you can think of that highlights Hillcrest as a strong DC neighborhood, and anything that shows HCCA as helping to facilitate that strength?
Well, of course, to start with, it's a beautiful community, and the beauties that we have been continued and enhanced, and I think that shows that one thing that people have in common who live here is that they value the beauty of their community. I don't think they would ever be categorized as wanting to tear down any of the beauty that we have. If you know what I mean, they don't want to be an enemy. They may disagree, like some people disagree with having the road, they call them road blocks, but if they don't like them, but the barriers in the middle of Branch Avenue, there's no ideal way to govern that, but they are part of the long-range plan that they came up with. Then, if they had been involved in community planning at that time, as they should have been, why, they could have spoken against it then. But once a decision is made, you can't both have it and not have it. So we have it. And that's the way community decisions have to be made. Not everyone will necessarily like the result, but they can still get on the bandwagon and work with it. Is that a sermon?